I spent 38 years as a home health aide. 38 years of waking up before the sun, driving to other people's houses, helping them bathe and dress and eat and remember to take their medications. I never complained, not once, because I knew what it meant to be needed, and I knew what it meant to be alone. And I would rather be needed. My husband passed when my son was 4 years old. Stroke, he was 41. One morning he was sitting at the kitchen table eating toast, and by noon he was gone. I didn't have time to fall apart. I had a little boy looking up at me with his father's eyes, and that was enough reason to keep moving. His name is Liam. Liam Arthur Prentice, named after my late husband's father, a man who never raised his voice and always kept his word. I raised my son to be the same. And he was. He is. That's the part that made everything so much harder. Liam grew up watching me work. He saw me come home with my back aching and my feet swollen, heat up whatever I'd managed to throw in the slow cooker that morning, sit at the table with him while he did homework, and then go to bed to do it all over again. He never asked for things I couldn't give him. He mowed the neighbour's lawn at 13 to buy himself new sneakers because he didn't want to ask me. That's the kind of kid he was. He got into NC State on a partial scholarship, studied civil engineering. I took on extra clients his freshman year, weekends, holidays, whatever I could get, to cover the rest of his tuition. I never told him how close we came some semesters. He had enough to worry about. After graduation, he got a job with a construction management firm in Raleigh. Good salary, real benefits. For the first time in my adult life, I felt like I could exhale. He called me every Sunday, came home for Thanksgiving and Christmas without fail. I had done what I set out to do, and we were close. Genuinely close. Not just in the way that people say they're close to their mothers, but don't actually tell them anything. He told me things. His worries, his goals, the small embarrassments of adult life. We were friends, in the way a mother and a grown child can be friends when they've been through hard things together and come out the other side. Then he met Cassandra. She was the daughter of a man named Roland Fitch. I'll call him that because that's his name and I see no reason to protect him. Roland Fitch owned a chain of car dealerships across eastern North Carolina. Nice enough on paper, the kind of man who wears a signet ring and laughs too loud at his own stories. His wife, Maureen, was quieter, but not in the warm way, in the way that a person is quiet when they're always calculating something. Cassandra was 29 when she and Liam met at a work event. She was pretty in a very deliberate way, the kind of pretty that takes a lot of money and effort to maintain. She was charming when she wanted to be, and my son fell quickly. I understood it. I'm not a foolish woman. She could be funny and light, and after years of watching me stretch every dollar and carry every burden, I think Liam was drawn to someone who seemed effortless. I tried with her. I genuinely tried. I had her and Liam over for dinner 3 times before they got engaged. I asked her questions. I listened to her answers. I didn't find a lot of warmth there, but I told myself that was my own bias, that I was protective of my son and reading into things that weren't there. Then they got engaged, and everything changed in a way I couldn't explain at first, only feel. It was small things in the beginning. Cassandra would answer for Liam when I asked him a direct question, not rudely, just smoothly, like she hadn't noticed she'd done it. She'd reference plans they'd made that Liam hadn't mentioned to me, and when I brought it up with him privately, he'd laugh and say she just got excited and got ahead of herself. They started spending every holiday with her family. When I pointed that out gently, Liam said her family was bigger and her mother put a lot of work into the gatherings, and he didn't want to make waves in the first year of the engagement. I understood. I really did. But something in my chest was getting tight in a way I didn't have a word for yet. They got engaged in October. The wedding was set for the following September, 11 months later. Cassandra's parents were paying for most of it, which I was told early on, and which I took as a gracious thing at the time. A big wedding, a venue in the Raleigh countryside, 200 guests. The whole production. About 4 months into the engagement, Liam called me on a Tuesday evening. That was unusual. We talked Sundays. I knew before I answered that something was on his mind. He told me that Roland and Maureen had asked that he and Cassandra sign a financial agreement before the wedding. He called it a family financial plan, not a prenup, because Cassandra had apparently made a point of calling it that. He said it was just about how they'd handle money as a household, who paid what, how accounts would be structured, how major purchases would be decided. I asked him if he'd read it carefully. He said he had, and that it was pretty standard. I asked if he'd had a lawyer look at it. He paused. Then he said Cassandra had mentioned her father had his attorney draw it up, and that it was just a formality, and that making it into a big thing would start their marriage on a bad note. I didn't push. I told him I trusted his judgment, and that I loved him, and I meant both of those things. But after I hung up the phone, I sat in my kitchen for a long time with the lights off. The rehearsal dinner was held the Thursday before the wedding, at a private room in an upscale restaurant near downtown Raleigh. Roland's choice. Of course it was. Everything had been Roland's choice. The florist, the caterer, the band, the hotel room block. My input had been neither requested nor offered a space. I was seated at the end of a table of 12, not the head, not near my son. At the end, between a great aunt of Cassandra's who was hard of hearing and a college friend of Roland's who spoke exclusively about his boat. Liam caught my eye from across the room a few times and smiled apologetically. I smiled back. I was wearing the blue dress I bought for his college graduation because it was the nicest thing I owned, and I had gotten my hair done the day before, and I was trying. About an hour in, I excused myself to find the restroom. On my way back through the hallway, I passed a small alcove near the hostess stand, and Cassandra was standing there with her mother. They didn't see me right away. I heard Maureen say, low and amused, "She's sweet." A little out of her depth, but sweet. And Cassandra replied, "She won't be a problem. After the wedding, she's his past, we're his future." I stopped walking. I don't know if they saw me or not. I turned and went back to the restroom and stood at the sink with the water running until I felt like I could walk back into that room without my face saying everything I was thinking. I sat through the rest of the dinner. I ate whatever was placed in front of me. I hugged my son on the way out and told him I'd see him Saturday. He looked happy, genuinely happy. And that was the thing that nearly broke me open right there in the parking lot. I drove home and I did not sleep. I had known something was wrong. I had felt it for months in the small dismissals and redirections, and the way Cassandra looked past me when I talked rather than at me. But hearing it spoken out loud, hearing myself described as his past, turned the feeling into something solid and undeniable. I thought about calling him that night. I picked up the phone twice. Both times I put it back down. Here is what I kept thinking. If I called him in the middle of the night, before his wedding, and told him what I'd heard, he would think I was threatened. He would think I was a jealous mother trying to hold on to her son. Cassandra would tell him that's exactly what was happening, and she'd do it so quietly and reasonably that he'd believe her. I would become the problem. I would be the one who tried to ruin his wedding, but I also knew that the document he'd signed wasn't a family financial plan. I had spent enough years helping elderly clients manage their estates and talking with social workers and navigating the bureaucratic end of caregiving to know that an agreement that controls how a person's income is allocated, especially one drawn up by the other family's attorney, was not a formality. I knew that much, so I didn't sleep. And by morning, I knew what I had to do. I called a family law attorney in Raleigh, a woman I found through a referral from a colleague whose niece had gone through a divorce the year before. Her name was Patricia, a no-nonsense woman who took my call that Friday morning, heard my summary of the situation in 10 minutes, and told me I needed to get a copy of that document. I called Liam. I told him I was coming over Friday afternoon to bring him the gift I'd been too shy to give at the dinner, and I needed 20 minutes with him alone. He said, of course, he'd be at the apartment. Cassandra was with her mother all day doing last-minute things. When I got there, I sat down across from my son at his kitchen table and I told him the truth. Not what I'd overheard. Not yet. First I said, I need you to show me the agreement you signed, not to challenge it, just to see it. As your mother, I'm asking you for 20 minutes of your time. He looked at me for a long moment. Then he got up and got the folder. I'm not an attorney, but I sat with that document for 15 minutes while my son watched me, and here is what I saw. A clause requiring that any property purchased during the marriage be held in a family trust, administered by Roland Fitch, until the couple's combined assets reached a threshold that, based on their current salaries, would take approximately 15 years to reach. A clause stipulating that in the event of dissolution of the marriage, Liam would be responsible for 50% of any outstanding family obligations, a term so vague it could mean almost anything. and a requirement that major financial decisions, investments, large purchases, changes in employment, be approved by a family advisory board that consisted of Roland, Maureen, and Cassandra. I put the document down on the table. Liam was looking at me. He wasn't defensive. He wasn't dismissive. He was looking at me the way he used to look at me when he was a boy, and he'd hurt himself and was trying to decide whether to cry. I said, "I'm going to read you 3 things in this document, and then I want you to tell me what you think they mean." I read them to him. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "I didn't read it carefully enough." I said, "I know." He said, "I trusted her." I said, "I know that too." He put his elbows on the table and his face in his hands. I sat with him. I didn't tell him what to do. He was 31 years old and this was his life and his heart. And I knew that whatever happened next had to be his decision. After a few minutes he looked up and said, "Did you know before tonight? Is that why you wanted to see me?" I told him about what I'd overheard in the hallway. I told him exactly what Cassandra and her mother had said. I told him I hadn't been sure whether to say anything, and that I'd gone back and forth all night, and that what made me pick up the phone was not what they'd said about me. It was the memory of his father, who died at 41, never having told me a hard truth because he thought he was protecting me, and how I'd wished for years that he had just trusted me with it. Liam didn't say anything for a while. Then he said, "Dad would have told you." I said, "He would have tried to fix it himself first, and then told me too late. You're better than that." We sat there together in that kitchen for a long time. I drove home that afternoon. I didn't know what he was going to do. I told him I loved him no matter what, that whatever he decided I would support, and I meant it. Marriage is complicated and love is real, and I didn't know the full picture of what he and Cassandra had together. It wasn't my call to make. Saturday morning came. I got dressed. I did my hair again. I sat by my phone. He called me at 9:45 in the morning. The wedding was scheduled for 2 o'clock. He said, "Mom." I called it off. I didn't cry. I wanted to. Instead I said, "Are you okay?" He said, "No." "But I'll get there." I said, "Do you need me to come?" He said, "Not yet. I need to make some phone calls." "But, Mum, thank you for telling me, for showing me, for trusting me to handle it." I said, "You're your father's son." He didn't say anything for a moment, and I could hear him breathing, and then he said quietly, "Yeah, I think I am." The fallout was what you might expect. Roland was furious. There were calls made and heated words exchanged, and a great deal of drama in the days that followed. Cassandra did not take it gracefully. She told mutual friends that I had manipulated my son, that I was jealous and controlling, that I had never accepted her. Some of those friends believed her. A few of Liam's co-workers who had also been at the rehearsal dinner were confused for a while. But my son knew what he knew, and the attorney he consulted the following week confirmed everything I had seen in that document. The family financial plan was, in her words, a mechanism of financial control dressed up in inclusive language. It wasn't technically illegal, but it was designed to bind Liam's economic autonomy to Roland Fitch's approval for the foreseeable future of their marriage. Liam took 2 weeks off work. He came and stayed with me for the first 4 days. We watched old movies, and I made chicken and dumplings every night because that's what I always made when things were hard. And we talked, really talked, in the way we hadn't been able to since before Cassandra, because there had always been somewhere to be or something to plan or a version of himself he was managing for her. He said to me one night, sitting on the couch with a bowl in his lap, "I kept thinking, the whole time we were together, that needing you less meant I was becoming a man. That distance was maturity." I said, "People tell young men that. It's not true." He said, "You never needed anyone and you were the strongest person I knew." I said, "I needed plenty of people. I just didn't always have them available." He looked at me for a long moment. Then he said, "I should have listened to myself." I said, "You were in love. That makes people generous with their trust. That's not a flaw. He's doing better now. It's been 14 months. He's still in Raleigh, still with the same firm, and they promoted him in the spring. He bought a small house, just his name on the deed, just his account funding the mortgage. He calls me on Sundays and sometimes Thursdays too now, and he comes home for every holiday. We don't talk about Cassandra much. There's not much left to say. She was a chapter that taught him something about the difference between a person who makes you feel good and a person who actually sees you. Those aren't always the same. As for me, I retired last fall. 38 years was enough. I have a small garden now, and a neighbour's dog that I walk most mornings, and a standing Tuesday lunch with 2 women from my old church who have also raised their children alone and know what that costs and what it gives. I think about that hallway a lot. Not with anger anymore, with something closer to clarity. I think about what I almost didn't do. How many times I almost didn't pick up the phone, almost stayed quiet, almost decided that not making waves was the same as being kind. My husband used to say that the truth has short legs. It can't run far before it gets caught. I used to think that meant the truth always comes out eventually, even if you don't do anything. But I've come to think it means something different now. I think it means the truth doesn't travel on its own. Somebody has to carry it. Somebody has to be willing to be slow and tired and scared and carry it anyway. I'm 63 years old. I raised a son alone. I drove to other people's homes in the dark for 4 decades and made sure they were safe and seen. Carrying hard things is what I know how to do, and I would do it all again. I've thought a lot about what kind of person I was before that night. Before the rehearsal dinner. Before the hallway. I think I was the kind of person who believed that staying quiet was the same as being gracious, that not making things hard for the people I loved was a form of love itself. I had practiced that my whole life, with difficult clients, with nosy neighbours, with every situation where speaking up would have cost me something. I stayed quiet, and I kept moving, and I told myself that was strength. But here is what I've come to understand, and I don't say it lightly. Silence is only a virtue when the truth doesn't belong to someone else. When it does, when someone you love is walking towards something that will cost them dearly, and you are the only one who can see it clearly, silence stops being grace and starts being a kind of abandonment dressed up in good manners. What Roland and Maureen built around my son was patient and deliberate. It didn't happen overnight. It happened in small steps. A holiday missed here, a question deflected there, a document signed without enough scrutiny. That's how control usually works. Not all at once, where a person can see it and recoil, slowly, until the walls are already up, and the person inside doesn't remember not having them. Liam is a good man. He is kind, and he works hard, and he trusted the people he loved. That trust was used against him. And I think about what his life would have looked like 5 years into that marriage, his income funneled into a trust he didn't control, his decisions requiring the approval of a man who had never once looked at him as a son-in-law, but as a resource. I think about who he would have become under that kind of slow pressure. Whether he still would have called me on Sundays. What I keep coming back to is this. The choices we make when we're afraid reveal more about our character than the choices we make when things are easy. I was afraid that night. I was afraid of losing my son, afraid of being cast as the difficult mother, afraid that the truth would cost me more than the lie was already costing both of us. And I made myself do it anyway, not because I was certain it would work out, but because I looked at my son across that kitchen table and I thought, he deserves to know. Whatever happens after, he deserves to know. Liam made his own decision. I want to be clear about that. I showed him what I saw. He's the one who read it, sat with it, and decided what kind of man he wanted to be. That matters. I could have made the same choice to speak and raised a son who dismissed it, who chose comfort over clarity. The outcome had as much to do with who he was as what I did. We had spent 31 years building the kind of trust where he could receive a hard truth from me and not hear it as an attack. That didn't happen by accident. That happened because of 10,000 ordinary moments, homework at the kitchen table, honest conversations in the car. The times I told him the truth, even when a softer version would have been easier. That's the thing about integrity. It's not built in the big moments. It's built in all the small ones that nobody sees, and then it shows up when it's needed and it holds. I don't know what Cassandra's life looks like now. I don't follow it. I genuinely hope she found her way towards something more honest. But I know what my son's life looks like. I know he bought a house with his own name on the deed and called me the day he got the keys. And I drove up to Raleigh and we stood in his empty living room eating pizza off paper plates. and he looked around at all that space that was fully uncomplicated. And he smiled the way he used to smile when he was a little boy who had figured something out. That's enough for me. That's more than enough.